Hey, it's Mr. Leatherwood.
And Mrs. Moore.
And we're going to tell you about all kinds of things involving percents today. And we're going to start with estimating. Estimating percents. So let's look at what is 20% of 38.95. So first of all, we're estimating. So we get to make it easier on ourselves. So what would you turn this to?
I would estimate $38.95 to $40 so that it's easy for us to get an idea of what our answer should be.
Okay. And go ahead.
I know 10% of $40 is $4 because all I need to do is move the decimal one place in $40 to the left, which is equal to $4. So 10% of $40 is $4.
Okay. And then we could double that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know that another one would be another $4.
And so 20% would be equal to $8.
Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how adults do it all the time.
Yes.
Like walking through the store, if we see 20% off, we do this little trick here.
We round our number so it makes it easy.
Mm-hmm.
We round to the nearest nearest dollar, then there's $10, nearest $100, and find 10%.
And we were talking about this. How do you know to move it to the left one for 10%?
Because 10% means 10 out of 100, and that tells me that all I have to do is divide by 10. And when I divide a number by 10, I'm making it smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to move that decimal one place to the left to make it 10 times smaller.
Okay. All right, so that's estimating. Now let's look at solving some percent problems. So let's get some examples. We have 16 is what percent of 25? So in this one, we're looking for the percent. And then we have 72% of what number is 54. So there was a number that we found 72% of it to find 54.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some ways to do this. Mrs. Moore and I love proportions.
Yes, we do.
We were talking about this earlier today. So we're going to set up a proportion. We're going to do x over 100, and that's going to equal our percent, because if we remember from 6th grade, percent means out of 100. Then we have P over W. Do you remember what P over W is?
P over W means part over whole.
Okay. So if we start filling in our information here. So first of all, we're looking for our percent, so we can't fill out anything over here. So that's all going to stay the same. So x over 100. Do we have our part or our whole?
We have both of those things.
Okay.
So it says 16 is what percent of a number, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole is the of part. Okay. So
Okay.
that is 25.
All right.
And then 16 is the part.
Okay. And then we know, since we've been doing ratios and proportions, that we could find a scale factor and figure out how we go from here to here and do the same on the top here.
Very good.
So 25 times 4, and we would do 16 times 4.
And 16 times 4 is 64. So that means that the x value is 64, and since it's over 100, we know that it's 64%.
Guess I should say just 64. Is that right? Okay. So we're going to do the same thing.
Well, honestly, it needs a percent, because since it's over 100,
Mm-hmm.
it's telling you that you're solving for the percent. So since the question is asking 16 is what percent of 25,
Mm-hmm.
it does need a percent symbol.
So maybe I should say which equals 64%.
That's awesome.
So that would be our answer.
Yes.
So on the other one over here, we're going to set up the same thing. And we're just going to use the information that they give us to solve. So we have 72% of what number is 54. So the 72%
Remember, your percent always goes over 100.
So we're going to put it over 100 like this. And then 72% of what number is 54? Is 54 our part or is it our whole?
54 is your part,
Okay.
because it says 72% of what number. And so we want the of what number is your whole.
There we go.
Okay.
So this is what you were talking about.
Yes.
So we were talking about earlier, sometimes you're going to find that finding a scale factor is difficult. So Mrs. Moore has a really cool way of doing it.
Yes. We can use cross products with the two numbers that are both given in each ratio.
Okay.
So we have 100 times 54, which I know that if I multiply 54 times 1 and just add 2 zeros,
Mm-hmm.
I get my answer, which is 5,400 or 5,400.
And do you write that up here?
I write that, yes, I would write that there.
Okay.
And then I know, since these two ratios are equal, that 72 times W,
Oh, you want to do the little laser thing?
Mhm.
Okay.
72 times W also has to equal 5,400.
So we could, if we wanted to, we could write it something like this.
You could.
Okay. So then, what do you do to find your answer?
Well, because since I know that 72 times W has to equal 5,400,
Mm-hmm.
I can just divide 5,400 by 72.
Okay. And that's going to equal, oh, sorry, have to do it on both sides. Little algebra here.
Yeah.
And that's going to equal 75. Oh, don't want to do that. 75. So that tells us that our whole is going to be 75.
Would we put a percent symbol on this one like we did the other one?
We would not, because if we look up here, 72 was over 100. This 72 over 100. So that was our percent. This is just our whole. So we don't
Okay.
have to make it a percent.
Yeah, we shouldn't make it a percent.
Right.
Because the percent's already given.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so this one's solving percent equations. We have percent equations help us to find what percent 300 is of 1,500. So let's fill these things out. And
Okay, so our percent,
we don't know.
we
do
don't know.
Okay,
So
that's our empty thing. So maybe we could say P.
well, would that confuse them with part?
Oh, maybe so. Maybe we could just do this.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Times helps us to find what percent 300 is of 1,500. So would that be our whole or our part?
Well, our 1,500 is our whole because
Okay.
it says of 1,500.
All right.
And our part is 300.
All right. So now this is where we do a little algebra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so we want to get our percent all by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have to do is we have to do the inverse of what we're doing. So if we're multiplying by 1,500, we want to divide by 1,500 to get it all by
Yes.
itself. And so when I do that, when I divide both sides by 1,500,
Remember that bar means division.
so these get to cancel out because they end up being one whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leaves our percent
Equal.
equals whatever 300 divided by 1,500 is. And
Can we cancel out those zeros?
we could, that would be easy.
Since there's one pair of zeros and then another pair of zeros, right?
Mm-hmm. So it would really be 3 over 15.
Mm-hmm. Or 1 over 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that 1 over 5 is equal to 2/10. So 2/10 is in decimal form would be 0 and 2.
Mm-hmm. Or
So-
2, or since we're talking about percent, maybe we should keep to our rule and make it out of 100.
Oh, okay.
And that would be 20 out of 100, which would be 20%.
20%.
So
Very good.
we finally get to use a little algebra in class.
Very good.
It's kind of nice. All right.
Which way do you like the best?
What do you mean?
Do you like setting up a proportion, or do you like the equation?
I do like me some algebra, but proportions are actually my favorite.
Yeah, I love proportions.
I had someone tell me you could solve any problem with proportions one time, and I tend to believe them.
I do too.
All right. Calculating simple interest. So we're starting to think kind of real world stuff using percents here.
Right. This is when people make money.
Yeah. So Charlie deposits $250 in a savings account at a simple interest rate of 4% per year, and he left it in for 5 years. So we're going to use the information they give us, and this is a formula, I guess, to figure out interest. So I is interest, P is going to be
your principal.
R is going to be our rate, and then T is going to be our time.
And Mr. Leatherwood, I-parity.
I-parity
is something you really need to remember. I-parity. And the reason I say that is because this formula will help. If you can remember I-parity, then you will remember the formula I equal P times R times T. And it's important that you understand that it's I-parity with the Y because the time has to be given in years.
Always in years, right?
Always in years.
All right. So I'm just filling in my information here.
So $250, since it's your deposit, is your principal. And your 4%, so the percent you wrote as a decimal, does it always have to be written as a decimal?
No, I could do a fraction if I wanted.
Okay.
The main thing you want to remember is that it's out of 100. So when I wrote it as a decimal, I made it 4/100ths. If I wrote it as a fraction, it would be 4/100.
So it needs to be written either in fraction form or decimal form. You can't leave it as 4%.
Right.
Okay.
And then I'm going to multiply that by 5, and I believe we end up getting our interest of 50.
And that represents $50, right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
And that's our simple interest.
So that 50 represents our interest. What if
the amount of money we made on that, right?
Right. What if I wanted to know what was in my account after my 5 years was up?
Okay. I would take my original. So I originally put $250 in there. And over the life of it being in there for 5 years, I made $50. So I would end up adding those two together, and I would get my total of $300 that I made, or that I have now.
Yes.
So there you go.
Okay.
All right, our last thing. Calculating percent increase or decrease. So let's give us a sample. So we have sales in a store were $93,570 the first year and $149,765 in the second year. What is the percent increase? And so we have a nice little formula to figure this one out too. It says if we're trying to find percent increase, we're going to take the amount of the increase over the original amount. And if it was percent decrease, we would take the amount of the decrease over the original amount. So it works the same. So we're just going to show you one little way. And so for example, to figure out the amount of the increase, we're going to take what it was in the original year, and we're going to subtract it from what it was in the second year. And that's going to give us the amount of the change, basically, the amount of the increase. And if you do that math, it gets us 56,195 over 93,570.
So the increase was 56,195, and the original is 93,570.
That's right. And when we do that division, we get something that's close to, close to 60%. When we divide 56,195.
Now, when you divided, you got a decimal.
I did. On the calculator, here's what it says. And it may go on forever. I'm not sure.
Right.
Okay. But what we're looking for, we know percent means out of 100. So I want to go to my hundredths place. So it's roughly 60%.
Right.
And I tell my kiddos that you always want to look at this number and tell me, do I want to keep it at 60 or do I want to go up to 61? And just a reminder, if this number is less than 5, we're going to keep it the same.
Right.
And if it's 5 or greater, it would bump up to 61.
Okay.
All right, these are everything involving percents that we're going to cover in the next few weeks.
Very good.
Hope you enjoyed the video.
Me too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.